Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 159 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I'm your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening here in the early portion of March, and I'm joined, as I often am, almost always am, honestly, by my co-host. His name is Scott Coleman. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, Brad. I'm doing really well. We are 3 weeks away from opening day, which is exciting. I don't know about you. It felt like the month of January was the longest month in the history of mankind. And then the month of February just flew by, like seriously flew by. I feel like players were showing up to spring training 2 minutes ago, and now we are already into almost a full week into March. So real baseball will be here before we know it. And we have a really good show lined up today.
Yes, we do. And in a moment, we'll be joined by half of the Mets'd up duo, our arch nemesis, I would say. Braves fans don't like the Mets. I get it. But they are our colleagues at Foul Territory at Mets'd up. So James will be joining us momentarily to kind of do a preview of the Mets in some respects, kind of a know your opponent kind of segment. Braves fans will be interested in the Mets, for good or for ill. I know they'll be rooting against the Mets all year long, but they'll be interested in the Mets after they literally, by the way, spoiler alert, they tied last year. It could not have been closer with the Braves and the Mets a year ago. Same record, all that stuff. We're also, by the way, part of Foul Territory, and please subscribe to our podcast. You can find us here at Hammer Territory anywhere you find your podcast. We are covering the Braves year-round. That is our focus on this podcast, but no days off for us, and here we go again. But at the same time, before we dive into the Mets, a little bit of news, not a ton going on. The Braves actually had an off day today, a rare spring off day as we're recording this podcast on Wednesday evening, but Tuesday made some news, and mostly I would say it was tied to the duo of Chris Sale, who the reigning Cy Young winner, who pitched for the second time in spring training on Tuesday. And he was caught for the first time ever by probably the biggest topic of all, Drake Baldwin, after the injury to Sean Murphy, which our colleagues, Steven and Sean, ably broke down on the podcast on Monday evening, the reaction to Murphy being out 4 to 6 weeks, all of that stuff, which kind of lines up, it seems like, Baldwin to be, the guy in the mix for the Braves as the starting catcher as soon as opening day, or maybe, we'll see how that goes. Scott, what was your reaction to this? There were some interesting quotes that you pulled from Chris Sale. Also, Sale looked awesome. That's part of this too. But that was kind of honestly the lead story and almost the only story from Tuesday.
As we kind of suspected, Drake Baldwin is, I think, now very probable to be the opening day catcher. I don't know if you feel differently, but that was kind of the immediate messaging from those around the team. And then the fact that 24 hours after it's announced that Sean Murphy has the cracked rib, that Drake Baldwin is catching Chris Sale and health willing, that very much seems like the opening day battery to me. And it really just kind of emphasized the point of we don't necessarily know exactly what the next 6, 7, 8 months are going to hold for the Braves at the catcher position. But one way or another, I'm pretty confident at this point that Drake Baldwin is going to play a role of some kind. I think my guess is that he's going to catch pretty much every day to begin the season. And then once Sean Murphy comes back, it will be Murphy's job, just as we suspected as of a week ago. And then the Braves really will just kind of take it week by week and day by day and just kind of see where everything's at. And if Murphy's having a good season, it's a non-issue at all because Murphy's having a great bounce back year. And if Murphy's struggling again, as he really did last season, you have a presumably big league ready catcher who is going to get a little taste of the majors, and we will see how it all shakes out. But in my mind, at least, this almost feels like a non-problem because you have two good to great options to play backstop for the team this year.
Right. It's certainly not a huge problem. And I think Sean and Steve talked about this a little bit too. We don't want to relitigate all of that. But, this is of the positions that the Braves could have lost someone that was one of their regulars. This is one of the better ones. Not because Murphy's not good. And there's this narrative that I won't yell about too much right now that Sean Murphy's like this terrible player. And I don't agree with that. But putting that to the side and all of the metrics that exist for that, Baldwin is, as we discussed with Gorov last week when he was on the show, Baldwin is clearly their number one prospect. And he is a guy that they think can stick at catcher. And that combination, by the way, also I pointed this out, I think people were surprised by this, even when I said it online. Drake Baldwin is going to turn 24 years old in 3 weeks, basically. And that surprised people. I don't know why. I think it's because he's the new hot shot, and it's he's actually older than you think. The example that I gave was that he and Michael Harris are basically the exact same age. They were born in the same month of the same year. And Michael Harris has been in our lives for so long that it feels like that's not possible. But
Yeah.
Baldwin is probably, more polished than a typical quote unquote prospect is supposed to be. That kind of thing. Age is not everything, but that's kind of his rep more than anything. It's like not necessarily the most sky high upsides, but a very projectable skill set for Drake Baldwin, and him being there. And look, I'll let you deliver the quote in full, but Chris Sale basically talking openly on the record about how Drake Baldwin is essentially going to be in a big role. Like, he didn't say it exactly like that, but there was no hiding from Chris Sale, who's not really a hider anyway. He's a very frank guy, but I thought the Braves aren't even really trying to spin it as if they're not going to play Baldwin. And look, they're not announcing that. And as I would have, Sean and Steven gave the caveat like, hey, the Braves could still just be like, you know what? We're going to go with Trump and Casale or something like that for 2 weeks and we'll see what happens. I guess they could, man, but it would surprise me. So you teed me up earlier. It would surprise me now, especially with what they've said on the record. The fact that Baldwin is not a 19-year-old. Like, the service time stuff that you would consider maybe is not something that I would worry about too much for a guy who's that age already.
Yeah.
All that stuff to say, like, I think it's his job, like you said, and it's not a problem. I mean, catcher's a spot where you do need two guys. And there maybe is a decision they have to make in late April. If Baldwin is not tearing the cover off the ball, Murphy comes back, and Murphy is Murphy in capital letters. Do you have Baldwin be the 30% part of a catching platoon, or do you have him go back to the minors for a while? That's a decision they might have to make. But like, in the grand scheme of things, not a big deal, honestly.
No.
So,
yeah, I mean, getting a couple of weeks for Drake Baldwin to get his feet wet in the majors, I have a hard time seeing it going poorly. Sure, maybe he isn't setting the world on fire. Maybe he goes 3 for 20 and then Murphy gets healthy. And then they say, you know what, Drake,
right.
Nothing has changed long-term, brother. Get down in Gwinnett, play every day, manage a pretty decent pitching staff, which is something that I know folks around the team have said that pitchers really like throwing to Drake. And two good quotes here from Chris Sale, as you said a moment ago, very much a straight shooter. Sale said, quote, "He's got an unbelievable work ethic, great routine, great attitude, and he's around the right guys. That's what you want from someone stepping into such a crucial role. He's asking the right questions and doing all the right things." And then Sale also added about Drake Baldwin, "I thought he looked great back there, never overwhelmed, never overmatched. He was locked in, and that was a lot of fun." End quote. It's a pretty ringing endorsement for a guy who is coming off the Cy Young and has been around for a long time, has thrown to a lot of catchers. And hey, in a perfect world, Baldwin is so good the first couple of weeks, and then Sean Murphy comes back, and Murphy looks really good too. And the Braves have a decision to make of what are we going to do? Do we go to a 50-50 split? Do we try to work in one of these guys at DH? I mean, who knows, Brett? I think, as is usually the case, these things work themselves out over the course of a season, and we'll have some clarity probably by mid-April once Murphy comes back.
Right, and it's kind of funny, and not in a ha-ha way, but both on the show that I did with Gorov and the previous show before the Murphy injury that Sean and Steven did, we both discussed the catcher scenario, basically. Like, what do you do with Baldwin before the Murphy injury? Like, it was already in the ether because Baldwin got anointed as the number one guy in the system and all these things. So it's already been out there. Look, Murphy taking a fastball to the ribs and getting injured is like something that happens in baseball. The timing is brutal after he had a bad season last year, and he did. He had a bad season. Like, we've been accused of being too nice to Sean Murphy. I mean, he wasn't good last year. We pointed that out ad nauseum. I think that was fair to say. I also don't think that erases his entire career body of work to that point. Both things can be true at the same time. That's kind of where I stand on Murphy. And look, if he's bad this year, as I think we've said on this podcast many times, it's a different conversation. If he has 2 bad years in a row, then it's a different situation.
Absolutely.
We're not there yet, though. So that's where we are. But yeah, all in all, the Braves are more equipped than basically any team could possibly be to have their starting catcher go down on whatever it was, March 2nd, in the way that Murphy did.
And thankfully, I'm not going to pretend that a cracked rib probably doesn't hurt like hell, but
it does. I can assure you it does. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of discomfort and all that. At least it's just a bone. It's not a soft tissue thing. I mean, again, I'm not a doctor, but I would be shocked if there's any kind of re-aggravation risk short of getting hit by a pitch again.
It's not an oblique. It's not something like that where it's going to linger for months and months. Yeah, I'm with you. That's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. It's a key distinction. Our guy Justin Schiano kind of made fun of somebody about this on Twitter. Like someone said he was like, Murphy's made of glass. It's like, if you've seen Sean Murphy, he's not made of glass. He's a finely tuned professional athlete, kids. Yeah. But alas, and look, we didn't know what happened. It was funny. I mean, I talked about it on the show the other day, but no one knew what happened. I mean, they covered. Everybody was there. The beat guys were there. No one talked about it, and then it hits on Monday morning, 3 days later, and nobody had any idea. So, spring training, man. Oh, before we sign off and go to James, I got to tee you up for this. People are really mad at you because we opened the show last time we did a show together by talking about about no injuries, and people were like accusing us of
I know
manifesting. But I will say, in your defense, as I said online already, injury already happened. We just didn't know it yet. But we talked on Sunday. It happened on Friday. So I think you're off the hook. That's my opinion.
That's right. We do a lot of podcasts. We try not to tempt the baseball gods by jinxing things, and just unfortunate, man. I feel for Murphy. I mean, he seems like a good dude. He's a quiet guy. He's not a big rah behind the scenes type. But yeah, man, getting hit by a 95-mile-an-hour fastball into the ribs, that doesn't make you injury prone. It means you got hit by a wild pitch. There's nothing he could have done. It'd be like blaming Austin Riley for breaking his wrist or his hand last year when he got hit by a 97 fastball. Shit happens. Right? I mean, that's what it is. And I really do hope, for the Braves' benefit, that Murphy has a good season ahead of him. Let's get him back to the all-star level catcher that he was with Oakland and even in his first season with Atlanta. And even if that doesn't happen, even if he's just okay or if he struggles again, the Braves are in a good spot overall with Drake Baldwin waiting in the wings.
That is a good way to end this segment, Scott. Well said. After a short break to hear from our sponsors on the podcast today, we'll be back with Jay from Mets'd and a full preview of the basically know your opponent, know your rival kind of segment about the New York Mets. All right, we are now joined by James Schiano, one half, let's just say the better half for this podcast of Mets'd. I wouldn't say that on your show, but since you're the only one here with us, James, we appreciate you doing this. How's it going up there? And I know you're all over the place doing preview stuff like we are in spring training. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I just can't wait. Baseball's like officially fully in the air. Like the fact that spring training's in full swing. We have 2 weeks until the Tokyo games. Like it's really starting to feel real. I know you guys don't have to deal with this, but it's getting a tiny bit warmer in New York. So that's kind of also brings the baseball a bit more, but it's exciting. I'm so freaking excited for this season.
Yeah, in particular, Scott does not have to deal with that. Scott's in Arizona, where it's never cold, I would assume. Maybe not never, but not really in any meaningful way. But no, you're here. We're going to talk Mets for the most part. Braves fans, of course, as you well know, do not like the Mets. But at the same time, they are rivals, and it's probably a modicum of respect for the Mets that we're doing this, because the Mets they're good, and that's the reality of the situation. Braves, Mets, Phillies are kind of the three teams it seems like are in the mix of the National League East. Of course, last year the Mets made the NLCS, went farther than the Braves did. I guess we'll start here. What's the overall vibe for the Mets right now? They got Juan Soto's there. That's kind of a big deal, I would imagine. What's going on around the Mets?
Yeah, I think the vibe is led by the fact that Juan Soto's with his team every single day, and just like you could feel an added level of like 1, excitement, 2, pressure, and 3, kind of the not the burden of expectations, but the understanding of expectations so far. That this team is now, even though he made the NLCS last year in a run that was pretty just kind of more based on like fun and friendship and teamwork rather than like actual skill, talent in baseball, which that was a big part of your guys' season too. But there's something that's now more supposed to happen, where there's where the expectations come into this. Like we took the Yankees' second best player. We took one of the best players in baseball off of the crosstown rivals. Like there's eyeballs on us that have never been on us before. Jeff Pass is tweeting about us on a weekly basis. And featuring us almost every single day. Like there's kind of a new air to what it means to be a Met fan, Met player, Met content creator right now that wasn't really ever here in the past.
And I'm curious to get your take, James, because the Juan Soto deal, look, man, you have to do whatever you have to do to sign a player of that talent. But there was a lot of interesting discourse, I thought, when the Soto sweepstakes were kind of winding down. Such a massive contract. And I mean, I get it. It's hard to plan out a professional sports franchise, even 1 or 2 years down the road, but 10, 15 years from now. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of excitement with the fan base. What was just kind of the overall, if you had to summarize the fallout with Mets fans with Soto signing?
Euphoria, bliss. Like as again, me coming from a Met fan, Knick fan, Jet fan, Ranger fan, taking out my Ohio State alumnus out of this was one of the better sporting moments of my professional sport watching career. Like, that's pretty sad to say. It's literally embarrassing, but I've never had a professional sports championship. I've only had my two professional sports teams make the championship. This was a moment where I celebrate with my co-host on the show, Draft Deck Mark Luino. We freaked out. We had a full-on episode. Like, we went out to my friend's bar on that Sunday night in Brooklyn, and we lost our minds. Like, we were screaming and jumping and dancing with people. Like, and again, that's pretty sad. Like, oh, LOL Mets, but this is one of the best players in the league, and he chose to play with us. We offered him a lot of money to convince him to do that, and plenty of perks along with that. But he's one of the few players in Major League Baseball that just elevates everyone. Like, you don't really hear that about a sport like baseball. You hear that about point guards in basketball. You hear that about quarterbacks in football. You hear that about good players in hockey. You don't really hear that a baseball player can elevate everybody, but he's that good of a hitter. He's that complete of a hitter. He's that young. Like, he's that dynamic that every single player in this team is going to be better off for it. So it was a moment that kind of hopefully becomes like a real stake in the ground for Mets fans. A moment we could be like, things changed on that Sunday night in December when that happened.
We joked heavily about Juan Soto coming to Atlanta, knowing it would never actually happen. We just didn't want to say that it was like a 0.0% chance. But we knew it was not going to happen. So I'm slightly jealous. This is the one time ever I've been jealous of the Mets, was Juan Soto being signed by the Mets.
And here's the thing: we got to get players to stop going to the National League East. Bryce Harper comes back. I mean, Jay, obviously you're rooting against 4 of the teams in the East. I mean, it feels like half of the big name free agents anymore, whether it's Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, now Juan Soto. Like, I was rooting for Pete Alonso to go somewhere else so we don't have to face him for 40 at bats every year. I mean, it's just the NL East, especially the big 3, and I mean, even the Nationals, if they can hit on a few additions, I think in free agency the next couple of years. I mean, this is. Maybe it's not quite the NL West because they have 4 really good teams and we really just have 3. But, man, I mean, this summer, the NL East is just going to be brutal, and every night is going to be a war when Atlanta, Philly, and New York meet up.
Oh, it's super going to be war. I cannot wait as a fan for the games when you guys in the Phillies come to Citi Field. Like, those are going to be special games because we get fewer of them now with the new balanced schedule. But it really is like kind of the tenor with the Mets so far this offseason is that, oh, you guys did all this, you're still the third best team in your division. The third best team in the NL East is still one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the entire National League. Like, yeah, the AL West, the NL West probably is a little bit deeper. But I think the Braves, the Phillies, and the Mets are all better than the Padres. I think they're all better than Diamondbacks. They're definitely all better than the Giants. Like, this division, these 3 teams, is truly a 3-headed monster. I'm not the biggest fan of the expanded postseason. Thank God we have it right now, because if this was going to be a fight, we're only going to make the playoffs, it would truly be a war of epic proportions. But it really does. It's crazy that we've kind of taken this mantle from the rest of baseball. This is now the best division in baseball. This 3-headed monster can't really be replicated in any other division across the league.
Yeah, Scott actually pulled this note that I'm going to steal from him right now and share it back to you because you mentioned the unbalanced schedule. But the Braves and Mets don't play till June 17th.
Yes,
it's like really weird. They don't play, and then they play 2 series, and out of 3, it's like they have these 2 clusters of matchups, and then it's like nothing before, nothing after. There's no late series this year. There's no showdown in September. It's a very odd thing.
It's really, really stupid. We play the Marlins, I think, either 10 or at least 7 times before we play you. We go on a West Coast trip before we play the Braves. The Mets don't have a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday home game against the Braves or Phillies the entire season. Can you imagine that? We have
wow.
2 Thursday games against you guys, and that's it for the entire thing, which is it makes me so mad as a fan and a resident of New York. So, like, I'm going to be at Citi Field 40, 50 times this year. It pisses me off that's the case. But again, it goes to show how important those games are going to be. And of course, it's June, so it's a perfect landing spot for you guys to get Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna back to full strength. Could not line up more perfectly. I guess we'll have Benaia and Monta. Not the same thing, but it's so annoying the way the schedule works out. But I can't even believe how excited I am. Like, what do you guys feel about the Mets right now? Seeing them go on last season, because last year, the way that the season ended, that weird doubleheader that Monday afternoon, where we kind of like everyone shook hands at the end of it, but like nice split. But we had the dramatic win first, and then you guys had to go to San Diego, and we got blessed with the Brewers. It still didn't feel like to me like we really beat the Braves because none of the Braves were actually there. Like, we beat half the Braves, we beat a couple of the Braves. But like, what's your guys' feeling after the way last season ended and the way this Mets kind of machine has moved since October?
Yeah, I mean, last year, I think Brad and I, even if we never said it officially on the pod, I think when Austin Riley broke his wrist in mid-August, we were just like, you know what, man, you're out Acuna, you're out Riley, Albies has been hurt all year. AJ Minter now with the Mets is out all year. Little did we know that Chris Sale, the Cy Young winner, was going to blow his back out the last week of the season. I mean, it's just
Pause.
it was just brutal. But I mean, the Mets, I think my one question about New York, and I'm curious to get your take on the rotation in particular. I think if baseball had maybe 16-man rosters or 18-man rosters, I think New York's 18-man roster is as good as like anybody's, whether that's the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Braves, the Phillies, whoever. I do worry a little bit about the depth kind of at the back end of the rotation, and there were a couple of injuries this spring, but I mean, I don't know, Brad, do you feel differently? That's kind of my vibe on the Mets right now.
I mean, obviously at the top end, Soto and Lindor, like 2 of the top 5 players in baseball, something like that.
Yeah,
you got Alonso. You get Alonso back, even though it took a long time because he probably should have taken the extension a year ago. I'm sure you're thrilled that he didn't take the extension at this point in time.
Ecstatic.
Worked out well for the team. But yeah, between those 3 guys in the lineup, the top end of the rotation potentially, yeah, I'm kind of with you. It's a scary top end, but you already kind of mentioned the pitching injuries. What is the state of the rotation? I mean, we have to ask you that considering the guys that are already banged up for the Mets, and it wasn't like a weakness coming in, but now down 2 guys. Like, what do you make of what that's going to look like?
It's definitely the weakness of this team, but I think that there's kind of this budding confidence inside the Mets community and among the Mets organization that between David Stearns, Jeremy Hefner, and Eric Yeager, the pitching director for the organization, things are just going to happen. Things will fall right. Like the way that David Peterson last year shows up and has by far the best year of his entire career, becomes like a true legitimate mid-rotation starter as someone who's been very disappointing for the first half of his rookie contract. The way that Kodai Senga developed in his rookie year, figuring out the color mid-season, May, June, and then taking that and kind of riding that to a top 5 Cy Young finish. The way that last year Sean Manaea watches Chris Sale pitch against the Mets in the middle of the season, and he goes to his pitching coach and he was like, "Hey, can I work on my release point and make it look like that?" And he's like, "Yeah, we could do that. Let's do some bullpens." And all of a sudden he comes out in the second half and goes ballistic. Like I wish that these guys weren't injured. I would love Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas and probably one more pitcher we could throw in on top of this rotation. But there's just this confidence I can't shake in guys like Clay Holmes coming to the rotation. Looks like a beast in spring training. A guy like Tyler McGill being 1 year behind David Peterson, finally kind of finding his moment. A guy like Brandon Sproat, big prospect, only 1 year in the organization as a draftee from 2023, like coming into the rotation mid-season and being someone who we can trust. Not as an ace, not as a guy who's going to like take the world by storm. Definitely not going to be a Schwellenbach because that guy's so good. But someone who I know can give us 5, 6, 7 innings every fifth or sixth day. Like I think that's kind of the company line right now for the Mets. And I think that you're going to have to get some innings from Blackburn and Canning. They're going to have to give you something. Every single team probably right now doesn't love their 5th and 6th starters, 6th and 7th starters. Unfortunately, the Mets guys are going to have to be in there in April. That's kind of the nature of the beast. That's why every team's 6th and 7th starters are very, very, very important. But there's this weird, again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is kind of this is like part of the Juan Soto effect, washing away my entire life of Mets fandom. But this strange confidence is just like washing over me, and I'm okay with the fact that this rotation looks truthfully ugly on paper right now, just based on the fact of who's in charge of it and how well this lineup is supposedly going to support it.
I'm gonna let Scott go, but I have to mention that you just kind of snuck it in there. But that's Braves legend Griffin Canning, former Braves standout great. Griffin Canning, who they had for like 5 minutes and then non-tendered. But hey, that's the same guy, everybody.
What was you guys just get off that Soler contract, got the half-year production, made the playoffs, got rid of him for free. You're like, all right, we really want Griffin Canning. We just really want
that was it.
Money. Thank you so much.
I was going to say, Brad, what was your favorite moment of the Griffin Canning era? There were just so many.
that one podcast where we talked about whether they would keep him or not, and they did. Yeah. That was it for Griffin Canning.
There we go. Yeah, it was a slow winter in Atlanta, sadly. Yes. Let us all hope that Jurickson Profar is really good.
Jurickson Profar is pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. We're optimistic.
He's lead off.
Yeah, he's just the only addition that the Braves made, James. That's the thing. As far as major league, real like big time investments, he's it. That's the list. So,
have you guys heard of Ronald Acuna Jr.? You're adding him.
He's pretty good too. Yeah,
you're adding him. Like these are new guys, right? Technically.
Wow, you didn't know this, but you just went full Chip Carey on us. We love that on this podcast. Braves, former Braves rock. He was a big fan of the addition by injury comeback as like, this is better than a trade. That was a Chip Carey that you just dropped on us, which I appreciate.
Addition by nothing.
Speaking of players who left Atlanta and now is with the Mets, AJ Minter, just an awesome reliever for this team for years. 2 years, 1 year, 1 year. 2 years, 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 1 year. 2 ye Of course, last year, kind of a lost season. He tried to pitch through that hip injury, but just was never himself, and then had surgery. But, what is AJ's role going to be with the Mets? I mean, obviously the ninth inning is pretty locked down in New York, but kind of what do you envision him doing this upcoming season?
Mitch is a guy who I've just always not been able to stand, of course, because if you guys know, he's always getting the Mets out, and he was always kind of an asshole about it while he was doing it. But he's just a really good reliever. I just do wonder about which Minter we're going to get. I know the hip injury was a big deal last year, and that kind of torpedoed his velocity toward the end of the season. But his velocity still wasn't great at the beginning of the season either, especially not like 96, 97 guy he was the 2 years before. And his strikeout rate was falling with that. And I know the color is still great, and the fastball shape is still good, so he can stand up to some worsened velocity. But giving him $11 million to me, that whole thing is relying on him basically throwing 96, 97 miles an hour again. So if they believe in that, I guess I have to believe in that too, similar to everything I was just saying about just having blind confidence right now in this Mets pitching machine. But I wonder about, because I think they're kind of counting on him to be like the true setup man, or at least the tough lefty guy right now. Because Danny Young and Genesis Cabrera are the other lefties in this bullpen. Both of those guys are not very much to write home about at all. I think if two of those guys were on the scrap heap tomorrow, I think it would take them at least 2 days to get picked up. I don't think they would exactly be like guys who were grabbed immediately. So with Jose Buda moving to the bullpen full time, being a good reliever, but kind of having his ups and downs, Reed Garrett and Daniel Nunez came out of freaking nowhere last year and became monsters by the middle of the season. I'm very confident those two again. Ryan Stanek also by playoff time got his whole self together, but there's still a lot of, it's not shaky, but it's definitely still a little bit questionable until we get to Edwin Diaz. So Minter getting healthy and be able to throw 96 again is a huge deal. I think he was weirdly one of the transactions this offseason that the bulk of Mets fans were the most excited about, because Mets fans always scream about the bullpen. Everyone's fan base screams about the bullpen. We watched our bullpen get run roughshod through by the Dodgers, the NLCS. It was a disaster what was going on in that bullpen, that NLCS. But I just think that Minter probably is a little bit less secure right now of a relief pitcher than most Mets fans want to believe. It's really about that hip and hoping he could be healthy. And he's 32 now, 31 at least. So it's getting up there a little bit for reliever. I just hope that he can recover and be the guy we want him to be.
Yeah, I always have to root for AJ, except for when he's playing the Braves. I'm a big fan of his work, but other than that, one set of series.
Fair.
Okay, this is going to be a two-parter in some respects for you. One positive and one negative, but I think you're pretty optimistic for what it sounds like. But part one is basically the Mets will win the division this year if what happens, and then the other side is they miss the playoffs. How does that happen? Like, what's the upside and downside scenarios for the Mets?
I love that question. So the Mets win the division if someone in this rotation becomes a freak. Like if Tyler McGill says, I'm going to be really good all of a sudden. If Clay Holmes is like, I'm a starter and I'm a really good one. If David Peterson takes another step. And this all is also on the back of Kodai Senga is healthy and is the same Kodai Senga we saw in 2023. And at the same time, Mark Vientos also has to be the same player we saw last year. Or Francisco Alvarez has to take the big step we're waiting for. Basically, you need 3 of those 5 things to happen, I just said, for the Mets to win this division. Or I need something horrible to happen to the Atlanta Braves. I need something terrible to happen to you guys. I need Ronald Acuna to be bad when he comes back. I need Spencer Strider not to be able to come back healthy. I need Schwelling back. I know it's terrible. I have been too many fantasy leagues, but he's an injury-riddled past, especially in Nebraska. I need Chris Sale the back to bark. I need something bad to happen to the Braves, and a lot of good things happen to the Mets. Because I still think, honestly, that you guys are like a full rung above this team. You just truly are. Like if I'm looking at most projection systems right now, the Braves are clearly to me a 90-win team. 92, 93, 94. I can see the Braves winning 100 games with this pitching staff. And the Mets still probably will have to scratch and claw to get above 90. We'll need things to fall right to get above 90. So in the inverse of that, how things go wrong for the Mets, miss the playoffs. If the Phillies go nuclear, if everyone in the Phillies just kind of is the exact same guy they were last year, that'd be very bad for the Mets. And then if this pitching staff, if we get 20th percentile outcomes rather than like 50, 60, 70th percentile outcomes, if Senga gets hurt again, if we get 2023 David Peterson instead of 2024 David Peterson, if Clay Holmes can't make the switch, if Blackburn and Canning just kind of expectedly aren't very good, if Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas don't come back from muscle injuries they sustained in February, which I'm terrified of that fact. So that's kind of the inverse. And even though with that, I think the Mets floor is probably still like an 80, 83, 84, 85 win team. So I think we'll still, worst case scenario, compete for that wild card spot, but it could get a little hairy and really get into that mud pretty quickly rather than competing for the division.
And I wanted to get your take on the Phillies. Later in the show, for our listeners, later in the spring, we're going to have someone from the Phillies show come on and do a similar type preview. But, what's your take on Philadelphia? Obviously, last year they won the division, first time since 2017. A team other than Atlanta won the division. I mean, my take, really a good roster. They are getting a little old, though, especially in some of those kind of most important players on that team. But obviously, there's a reason the Phillies are top 5 in World Series odds and, pretty even. I mean, I think Atlanta, last time I looked, is a slight favorite to win the East, but New York and Philly are both right there.
I think the Phillies are more so that team you guys are describing at the top, where it's like if this was the top 15 players on the roster, the Phillies are special. But the Phillies' bottom of the roster gets so bad so quickly, where they're going to be relying on major at-bats from guys like Edmundo Sosa, who I actually kind of like, but like is not really the caliber of someone who could be starting on the division champion. Buddy Kennedy. Like they really did a good job in shoring up the back of that rotation when Jesus Cesar, though, because that's just an upshot guy. Now it could be the 5th starter as opposed to Taijuan Walker and that other, who's their other guy? Tyler Phillips, Connor Phillips, whatever that last name Phillips is, guy getting starts in the team who just gets lit on fire every time he steps on the mound. And their bullpens also, I don't know, it feels to me a little shaky. Romano, him being non-tendered from the team that had him forever makes me think that elbow can explode any given moment. And Strom, Kirkering, and Alvarado, like those guys can do it, but those guys are also not as – out of Strom last year in the regular season was amazing. I probably have too negative of a glow because of what we did to them, dismantling them in the NLDS. And their vibe right now in the eyes of Mets fans, but this is still a really, really, really good baseball team. The top of that line is ridiculous. Like, there's no way Trey Turner – I mean, the Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, like that's special. In terms of top 3 in baseball, there's still few teams that good. But Bohm never took the step. Castellanos is just he's become such a, I don't know, in terms of wins above replacement, he's barely beating Anthony Rendon over the last 2 seasons, which is all really you got to know about that. JT, I think, still has a lot in the tank. But then like the Kepler, Stott, Marsh, like those are still good starting caliber baseball players, but it gets bad quickly for this Phillies team. I still think they're really good. I think they're probably being slept on a little too much right now in the national media, but there's something just not there. Something is not twisted into place for this Phillies team in the last 2-3 years. You get so close. You get so many bites at the apple. Like, how many more can you really get with the same core? Sometimes I think I don't really know.
This is our one joint rooting interest, by the way, just against the Phillies. We're all 3 in unison on this one. So, sorry, Scott. This is unscheduled. But you mentioned Castellanos. I have to ask you about this, and I forgot till right now. You might have seen this. Castellanos said this winter that he thought Jose Iglesias should have been the NL MVP last year. Did you see that interview?
Oh, yeah.
Did you hear about this?
Mm-hmm.
What did you make of that? Because obviously Iglesias is gone now. If people don't know this, he did not sign with the Mets. He's with the Padres now. Obviously, that's a bit of a silly statement. I think we all probably understand that. But the loss of Iglesias and also the reaction to that comment by Castellanos.
So this is funny because I got a lot of flack in the Mets community because I said it sounded to me like Castellanos was being tongue-in-cheek, like kind of being a jerk, trying to kind of take away from like what the Mets accomplished last year. Because everyone around the league, even the foul territory guys like Kras and Brzezinski, kept being like, this is a gimmick team. This team is like kind of winning on smoke and mirrors. But it kind of worked for them for what they needed, for what they had to do. And I thought Castellanos was kind of playing off that. And I got a little defensive in Mets mode. And I was like, screw this guy. He's being a jerk. I can't wait to beat him on the field again. And all the Mets people were like, oh, I think he's actually being genuine. He's just talking about the value of Iglesias. I'm like, I honestly don't see it, guys. But I think the Mets really fell in love with Iglesias because of, first of all, when he walked onto the field last year, every single thing changed for this team. Like he kind of gave and wound up being the straw that started the drink. Between the song, between him hitting 300, between having an 850 OPS, between him playing elite defense at both second and third base, wherever he had to go in a given day in a given inning, it all just worked. I'm not that mad he's gone because the Mets are at the point right now where they need to start letting these young players get these reps. Like you need Luis Angel Acuna to take a step. You really wanted to see if Brett Baty could take a step. Like Jet Williams isn't far behind. Like we have infielders to the point where I don't think I really needed Jose Iglesias like clogging up that roster spot. But that would have been my opinion last year too, and I would have been super wrong about that. So it is funny. It's going to be bittersweet to play against him this year. I think a lot of Mets fans are really going to hold on to this OMG stuff. I know the Mets organization is probably going to really try and hold on to it too, but it's going to be awkward when he's gone. I hope that there's enough to mitigate the loss of Jose Iglesias with Juan Soto. I really hope so. But sometimes it was really special what he was able to do last year, and I'll truly never forget what Jose Iglesias did for the 2024 New York Mets.
Yeah, it's very much against my DNA to ever root for the Mets, but I did find myself cheering for. Actually, I found myself rooting for like 36 inning ties between the Phillies and the Mets in the NLDS. But the Braves have obviously been victimized by Philadelphia the last few years in the postseason, and I mean the Mets are a great story, even if objectively we don't. They're not our favorites.
Can I ask you guys about what is the rivalry like between you and the Phillies? Because for me, it always seems to be like you guys kind of hate each other by proxy, where the Mets really have the historic rivalry with both of you guys. You guys just hate each other because you're kind of around each other. You're competing with each other.
Yeah.
Like, where's that?
I was gonna
hate?
say,
do you get true hate for each other like we get for both of you?
it might be. This is just me, but it might be like, how old are you? Because like when I was growing up, the Mets was the main rivalry. The Chipper Jones Mets stuff, like that was the heat. You know, as a teenager, that was it. The Phillies were just not. They were bad. They were bad for a long time, and then they got good. And of course, the team that you are competing with directly is the team that you in that moment are probably a little bit the most mad at. And then in the last couple of years, especially if you're a certain age Braves fan, it's been the Phillies mostly. A couple of playoff exits recently. Of course, last year the Mets was back and forth down to the end of the regular season, but I think it just kind of maybe depends on the day or the year or the age. I still think, honestly, my history is I'm a little bit more Mets as like my historic rival for the Braves, but I bet you if you ask them one different age, they might say something different. I don't know about Scott.
Maybe we'll do a poll. That'd actually be like, as a Braves fan, which team do you dislike more, the Phillies or the Mets? I would honestly, I think Brad's spot on. I think it might be an age thing. I'm guessing it'd be pretty close to 50-50.
I think it almost. I mean, I don't know. I feel like it would have to be more Mets. I mean, just thinking about that, because I'm curious about even who would be like a third rival for you guys, because we have like the built-in third rival with the Yankees. Like, I think it's the
Marlins. I mean, Marlins or Yankees,
just for fun.
Honestly, well, it's funny. It's not really Yankees anymore, but again, my age, it was the Yankees. We lost to the Yankees 3 times in the World Series. Like, it obviously became a thing, and I hate. Honestly, if it's me personally, the Yankees are third for me. I hate the Yankees, but only because of the age that I am and the Braves losing them in the World Series. That's why I hate them.
So you're just going full John Rocker, just hate New York to the core.
I mean, I don't hate the city of New York. I actually quite like the city of New York, just not the baseball teams. Anyway,
John Rocker, what a good
John Rocker style. I don't want to be associated with John Rocker, just for the record.
No, of course not. Of course not.
I'm not going John Rocker. I know. I just want everybody to know that. Scott, anything else you want to tack on here or get James' opinion on? I mean, I think he's, for good reason, optimistic about the Mets. The Mets were, I'll admit this. The Mets were not really on my radar last year. I was coming into the season, I was pretty low on the Mets, and I was wrong. They came on very strong, and now they have Juan Soto. They're not seeking anybody this year, but anything else you want to add, Scott? I don't know.
Well, and the Mets have David Stearns, which, the day that's I roll
my
eyes.
And money, by the way. David Stearns and a lot of money behind him, which is probably a bad combination for your
A and B, which is awesome.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous, man. I mean, again, we talked about the start, but I mean, Philly always carries a big payroll, a ton of talent on that team. You're absolutely right, James. The top 15 for Philadelphia also goes toe-to-toe with anybody in the game. But the back end, we'll see. But we would be remiss not to get your very, very, very official National League East prediction here in the first week of March. Just for folks listening, at the moment, the DraftKings has the Braves as slight favorites to win the East, plus 110. Phillies 215, Mets 240, which is interesting to me. I actually think I like the Mets more than the Phillies. Fangraphs has both the Mets and Phillies at 87 wins and the Braves at 93 wins. Frankly, I might take the over on all three of those teams if I had to. But, James, your official NL East prediction that I am sure nobody will lose their minds at.
Yeah, and I think that we can go over all three of those because we're just going to hopefully beat the crap out of the Marlins every single opportunity that we could possibly get. That team might be worse than last year's White Sox team, which feels crazy.
Oh, yeah.
They trade Sandy Alcantara. But, I mean, I'm coming on the Braves show. It's Mets, Braves, Phillies. That's going to be my official prediction. I might say something different on my own show if I do an objective, do something else objectively, but I can't come on here not believe the Mets are going to beat the Braves this year.
I really feel it could go any way. Again, obviously we all have inherent biases. We try to be objective, all that stuff. But I mean, you could tell me that at the end of September, the Braves win the division, the Mets win the division, the Phillies win the division. All three of those are so possible to me, and that's that's pretty rare in baseball in this modern era where you have three legitimate World Series contenders in the same division. And I mean, again, also as we've seen, winning the division is probably the first it's the goal, right? Like no matter what team say, you want to win the division. But
firmly.
The last 4 or 5 playoffs have shown, especially with it being expanded, that winning the division, you get a couple extra days of rest and maybe an extra home gate, and that's where the advantage ends.
I mean, we know you guys hate extra days of rest, so you guys are probably trying to avoid that at all costs, right?
Yeah. I still, to the end of the earth, will always say, give me the division and the extra rest. And
100%.
Maybe I'll be wrong, but no matter how many times the Braves tend to not have that take advantage of, I will be still on that side of things.
I'll say, from having been in the 2 of those 3-game wildcard series, you guys are in 1 now. It's not fun. I would love to win Division 1. It's like the Michael Scott joke. Wow, division championship seed, great. We'd love to be a part of one day.
I'm with you all the way.
I love
it. Scott, anything else you want to add before we sign off here?
The only thing I want to get, and it's going to be about an hour segment, is so Brad is a Michigan man. James, you shared you're an Ohio State alum, so maybe I'll just drop off the call now.
I didn't know that.
That won't be good for anybody.
We're born to hit. Oh, now I noticed it behind you. Damn. Oh no.
Yeah, it's right there on YouTube. People are watching. I'm not wearing a Michigan shirt today though. At least there's that. I occasionally will on the podcast.
I mean,
it's okay.
I don't know. It's pretty cool that like in the modern landscape of college football that Michigan and Ohio State have won the last 2 championships. I think that lines up to be incredible theater next year in Ann Arbor. I'm very excited for that.
Half of our not Scott or I, half our podcast. Sean's a Tennessee guy and Steven's an Alabama guy, and they go head to head a lot. So they're on their own show yelling at each other sometimes about college football. So it's just one of those things. We all love college sports, and
I know. Again, this is a shame that they root for the SEC, which is now just kind of lower tier college football. It's a real shame how things.
See, now we're gonna get in massive trouble, which is fine. James said that. I did not. Neither did Scott. For the record, for my listeners.
It's all right. It's kind of like minor league baseball, like AAA. You're not going to be a major league team. Like the SEC just can't. And that we'll get to that point eventually.
It's going to end badly.
SEC guys, James_Schiano on Twitter. Let me know how you think. But
yeah, there it is.
A couple years of proof now.
Well, I appreciate you generating some YouTube comments for us with that comment at the end of the podcast. Scott, let's sign this thing off and thank James for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, James. We appreciate you taking the time. I am sure the Braves and Mets have a lot of big time battles coming up in the next 6 months. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think having the Braves and the Mets and the Phillies, even if it does make for more challenging seasons, is overall good for the game. Big markets, teams with history. It's just going to be a lot of fun, and I think that rivalry is just going to be ignited even more this upcoming summer.
I think, truthfully, the National League East has some of the best rivalries in baseball. The Dodgers and the Padres and the Giants kind of rival at the Yankees, the Red Sox, of course. But between 3 teams that hate each other's guts and have the players in the field to kind of back it up and put real theater out there, like this is as good as it's going to get in baseball this season. I can't wait for it.
It's going to be fun. I appreciate you coming on, James. I know Scott does as well. I know our overlords at Foul Territory probably love the crossover episode here early in March. Shouts to those guys listening to this podcast. Hi, Scott. Hi, Mark, etc. But thanks for being here, James. We really appreciate it. People should be listening to Messed Up. Now, there'll be hate listening if you're Braves fans, but you can subscribe and download. Yeah, it's fine. People, I'm sure, hate listen to us. That's just part of the deal. This is where we're all one big happy family here. I have some hate listens that I will not name on the podcast of other sports things that I listen to that I don't really like listening to, but you just kind of have to do it sometimes. So there you go.
We do get legitimate Braves hate listeners. So if you guys want to come listen to that Braves fans, like we do have a bunch of you guys that will be in our YouTube comments, especially because my co-host Draftneck Mark, big Braves hater, big YouTube channel. So the Braves hate is alive.
There you go. Well, thank you, James. Please subscribe to Mets Up, and also, of course, subscribe to Hammer Territory anywhere you find your podcast. Follow Scott, follow me, follow the show, etc. And we'll see everybody next time.